And we're live. We're live, guys. Welcome to another episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Michael Boldin. We're streaming live from here at the 10th Amendment Center. It is 9:30 a.m.-ish Pacific time here on the West Coast, Monday morning, August the 20th. So happy Monday to you. I hope you are having a good start of the week so far. And thank you, of course, for being here with us. Today, of course, I should not forget. Don't forget to smash the likes. Leave some comments and share what we're doing here throughout your social contacts, whether you use social media, email, etc. So today we're going to cover two issues that are basically very, very much intertwined. First of all, some new propaganda from CNN. Surprise, surprise, but this time on the war in Yemen. And then from there, I also want to talk about a new effort in Congress to defund, to use the power of the purse to defund U.S. involvement in that horrible conflict. So, again, smash the likes, leave some comments, let me know your thoughts on these issues as we go through it, whether you're watching live or in the archives. And let's get to it with our first article. First article actually comes to me through a tweet from Glenn Greenwald yesterday. No, not yesterday, last week. He says, "Oh my God, an entire op-ed that one pretends that the U.S. hasn't been actively aiding and supporting and enabling the Saudi destruction of Yemen for years, and two, doesn't mention the word Obama, because it pretends support for the Saudi war started with Trump. Pure propaganda." Now, no one should be surprised by this at all, certainly. Propaganda from the media has been strong for quite a long time, probably forever. Certainly when the media companies were just ABC, NBC, CBS. We were spoon-fed information. Now the information gets a little bit more... we get a little bit more honesty out there because independent people can report and create very large presences on the internet. But that does not... I know I was in an interview recently, and I mentioned that that Rachel Maddow a few years ago attacked 10th Amendment Center specifically for about 10 minutes, took an entire segment talking about our work using nullification to reject, resist, and, of course, nullify federal acts, specifically Obamacare, which we would still like to see happen, of course, and are working on that as well in the upcoming 2019 legislative session. But the host of the show, a conservative Republican, said, what's the point? Why do you even care? No one watches their show anyways. And I think it's pretty clear that the readership and the viewership of the mainstream media is declining. But the messages they put out certainly get parroted, and it gets picked up by other sources, including even respected blog-type sources. So as long as they continue doing this, they are pushing a particular message. And this one on the Yemen war, I think, is incredibly bad, as Glenn Greenwald pointed out. And this comes from a lady named Jill Filipovic, or Filipovic, depending on how you say the word. And she's talking about how, she actually rightly calls out that the Saudi campaign is awful. But where she makes two big mistakes is, one, as Greenwald noted, that it's just mere silence, that the U.S. is just not talking about it. This ignores the fact that the U.S. is providing military weapons to the Saudis to conduct these actions without the U.S. military infrastructure to be able to do that. But then on top of it, they're also aiding in some logistic support, on-the-ground support and refueling missions, things like that. So they are actively involved, and for all we know, Saudi Arabia is just acting like the good client state that it is. Here's how she puts it in her op-ed. She says, the Trump government, well, this is after noting that this silence or this deference towards the bad regime has been going for years. So she's correct on the fact that something's been going on for years, but she refers to it simply as deference. So prior to Trump, it's as if, they were just turning a blind eye to things that were going on. And then once Trump got in, then all of a sudden things escalate. And she says that the Trump government is especially sympathetic to the Saudis, even at the expense of our closest allies. It says a lot when you're throwing your lot in with Saudi Arabia over Canada. It's a great line. This despicable embrace of the Saudis should be a bigger scandal than it is. True. But the administration is benefiting from its own self-induced chaos and dysfunction. American journalists and the public are so focused on our domestic disorder that they pay ever less attention to conflicts abroad. Now, as Greenwald pointed out, this is nonsense. It's total propaganda. It is directing the message, again, in a partisan fashion that this is just about Trump. And, oh, previous presidents have been bad. They've not really given it the attention that they need. But Trump is really insane on this. And Trump is actually being really bad on Yemen, no doubt about it. But the important fact is that, again, the U.S. military involvement is pretty direct with the logistical support, the military refueling, and the providing of weapons. And this started in 2015. It's not that it suddenly ramped up as soon as January 2017 came in, but 2015, all through 2016, Obama was the guy in charge, and this was happening, and there was no outrage, and the journalists weren't talking about it. I don't think Jill, is that her name? Jill? I don't think Jill was talking about this when Obama was in office. And I think this kind of goes into the whole myth of the so-called peace president. I keep talking about it on this show. I keep talking about the fact that when Obama was running, it was absurd to me to see these bumper stickers with a peace sign through the O, because the guy is a warmonger. I also talked about how he dropped 30,000 more bombs, 100,000 to 70,000, than the Bush administration did. And that was with the physical invasion of Iraq. So whether you think the wars were by Obama, generally the people who opposed the Bush wars were oftentimes silent on the Obama ones. I know there's a small contingent in the anti-war movement, Cindy Sheehan, for example, who camped out in front of the Bush ranch. She was vehemently opposed to the Obama wars. Greenwald clearly is consistent on this. So you don't have to like all of their other policies, but certainly some people have been consistent on this. Unfortunately, it's a small number of people that have been consistent. And then, of course, people in the libertarian movement like Ron Paul, Daniel McAdams, Scott Horton have all been very consistent on this. Tom Woods, consistent on this, opposing the empire and opposing these violations of the Constitution as well, which we can get into maybe in another show. But this has been going on all along, and it feeds into this myth that somehow the people who opposed Bush got a win for peace. The Nobel Peace Prize winner that bombed more people dropped way more bombs than anyone in modern times. Trump is on pace to easily defeat that, but who knows? It could change in the near future. It could. I hope so. So this is really nasty propaganda. And it also fits in with the same kind of propaganda on Obama regarding marijuana and the 10th Amendment. So many people have told me that, and I've read this from political pundits, from mainstream media. I've seen this over and over in blogs, people that I respect. Oh, Obama backed off on marijuana prohibition enforcement. This is at least a positive thing. And yes, in the bottom line, less federal enforcement of an unconstitutional ban on a plant is a positive thing. But it wasn't because Obama was some kind of pothead and he was really on board with the 10th Amendment, or he was supportive of the right of people to choose what kind of product they were going to consume. Absolutely not. I've mentioned it before. I've talked about it in speeches. We've covered it in articles. We've done videos on it, but it cannot be repeated enough. In Obama's first term alone, his first term, his administration spent more on federal enforcement measures and conducted more federal raids on dispensaries throughout the states, heavily here on the West Coast, California, Montana, Colorado, spent more and conducted more raids than Bush and Clinton combined. So again, the myth, the propaganda that we've been getting is that the Obama administration was peaceful on foreign policy. Maybe, you know, he didn't make some great choices. He was under pressure from the Republicans or something like that, and he didn't make some great choices. He deferred to the Saudi Arabian government. But no, he absolutely was engaged actively from 2015 and 2016, the last 2 years of his presidency, actively engaged in supporting the war in Yemen by providing material support and resources. Now, if you read the Patriot Act, I want to say hello to Justin in the chat and anybody else who is watching here live and, of course, in the archives as well. Thank you for being here with me today. Wow, I lost my train of thought. We're talking about Obama, Yemen, and we're talking about material support and resources. That's what I was getting into. This is a term that's specifically used in the Patriot Act, and they put that in there, and I think it was Sensenbrenner who put it in there, because it's an extremely broad term in the legal sense. So if you are even accidentally providing funding or a mouthpiece to a terrorist organization or an organization that may not have been terrorist at one point, but the U.S. government decides to put on a terrorist list, you could be charged with providing material support or resources. So the idea that this is not happening in regards to Yemen is absurd, because fueling support is active support of their bombing campaigns, providing them the weapons. And I actually got a comment on my Facebook profile, my personal one, from someone that I respect, an Austrian economist that I actually respect a great deal. But he had said to me, oh, well, this is just this is not helping. The U.S. is not engaged in this war in Yemen. They're just selling goods. I mean, the U.S. has some military equipment, and Saudi Arabia is purchasing it, and that's not providing support for the war. That's just doing capitalism, basically. And that is nonsense, because unless those goods are available in the open market for anyone to buy, then it isn't really capitalism. This is some kind of state-controlled capitalism or corporatism, some level of, I mean, it's used too common. I hate to use the word fascism because everybody calls everyone a fascist these days. But that is how Mussolini described it. Fascism would most rightly be called corporatism, because it's the blending of state and corporate power. So you have these companies like Boeing or McDonnell Douglas that are building this equipment for the U.S. government. And then the U.S. government is limiting those products. They're not selling it on the open market. And even though they're taking money from Saudi Arabia, which probably comes from financial aid taken from us, the taxpayers, in the first place, and then they're spending the money getting it back to the U.S. government, I'm not certain about that kind of loop. But this is actually happening. They're providing this stuff and they're limiting it. They're choosing who can get it. So that is actually making active support of this. And Taco Salad says an Austrian said that. Yes, an Austrian, a Mises Institute. And I love Mises. And I don't think this is a Mises Institute statement, but I find it absolutely absurd that anyone with this kind of background could look at this situation and say, okay, the U.S. government is restricting the sale of these arms. They're actually working in partnership with a corporation and limiting, they're not providing a free market in this. And then they're picking and choosing who gets it, knowing what they're doing with it. Well, that's certainly material support or resources as defined in the Patriot Act. The U.S. government is actively involved in helping the Saudis in this war in Yemen. So it is pretty bad news. The propaganda is extremely bad. And I think the propaganda goes both ways. I don't want to leave Trump out of this too, but there is heavy propaganda, him being that he's a Second Amendment guy. And again, this is something I've talked about for quite a while now. The Trump administration, of course, Trump was backed by the NRA, even though he has a history of advocating for gun control. And so people told me when I would point this out during the campaign, well, Hillary's going to be worse. And certainly I think Hillary has zero respect for the Second Amendment. But this isn't about Hillary Clinton. This is about a myth. The Obama administration, it's a myth that Obama was peaceful when it came to foreign policy and the drug war, two major wars, foreign and domestic. Total propaganda. And Greenwald is correct when it comes to Yemen. But the myth goes the same way on Trump. He's a Second Amendment guy. Don't worry about the right to keep and bear arms. We got the Second Amendment guy. The NRA-backed president is finally won. And then, of course, he calls for a bump stock ban. And he wants it. And he's called for gun control in the past. So he didn't just, as people told me during the campaign, he didn't just all of a sudden change his mind. And of course, I'm not the type of person that says, well, he said it in the past and he can't reform himself. I'm a reformed commie. So of course I believe that people can change their views. And when they do, we should applaud them. But since he's been in office, he's proven that his views have not been changed by calling for the bump stock ban and by not stopping the ATF. The ATF has gotten far worse than it was under Obama. So hopefully he's aware of this. I don't want to claim that he's just some ignorant moron like everybody else does, because I actually think, even though I don't like President Trump on constitutional issues or in support of liberty, I would never be one of these people that says, oh, he's just a moron. Obviously, you have to be incredibly skilled and intelligent to direct a campaign as a huge underdog and win the presidency. That is massively talented. So I don't want to blame ignorance for the fact that gun control enforcement has ramped up. But I don't want to talk about that all day. This is primarily about the myth of Obama on war. Now, interestingly enough, there's a new amendment that's been filed by the anti-free speech, anti-First Amendment Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. This guy is awful. Will Johnson is right. It's assume nothing. Taco Salad says it's populist flip-flopping. And I think that's actually a good point. When your principles come from, and I don't know if populist necessarily just means popular, but for the masses in some way, when your principles start from there rather than from a foundation, whether it's good or bad, if your foundation is the Constitution, as the founders gave it to us, then you're going to start from that. And whether you think someone is reading it incorrectly or they have the wrong view, at least they're starting from there. And it's going to be a consistent foundation through and through. I was at a housewarming party with some friends, and a good friend of mine who is was a Hillary Clinton voter, one of those hold-the-nose Hillary voters, but definitely a progressive, Bernie Sanders type of guy, but really good person. He, I mean, he totally gets this too. He was actually noting, and I was really happy to hear this, that, look, you got to actually look to the left. The people on the left who have taken a bad view on this, or taking a positive view on recognizing that the Trump administration is exercising too much power on foreign policy, they have to actually look back to Obama and even further back. But he was really just talking about Obama, because the Obama administration used just unilateral executive power to do the same kind of stuff. So it is certainly flip-flopping. And when you just choose what's popular at any given moment, whatever's the month or the year or the administration, your foundation is weak and you're going to certainly flip-flop. So thank you for pointing that out. Will Johnson says, my foundation is based on federalization and the Articles of Confederation. We don't hear that too often. That's pretty cool. A lot of the parts of the Constitution itself, if you actually read through a lot of the debates, they discussed the articles as especially like the Supremacy Clause, for example, the 10th Amendment. These are based on the foundation of the articles as well. But that's another conversation. So let's get into this amendment from the awful Chris Murphy, who's doing something positive. So like I noted last week, the NDAA was signed into law. The National Defense Authorization Act for 2019 was signed into law, and it included some very, very modest restrictions on U.S. involvement in the Yemen war. Support. Not even direct, well, it is direct involvement, but the way they call it is just support. And the Trump administration, or Trump put a long signing statement saying he's going to ignore that. And this is part of this whole sequence of events. When one president does it, the next one, the next one, the next one. We can go back through all kinds of modern administrations and find these signing statements. They're going to ignore this and that. So what's happening? Some people in Congress would like to stop this. I don't really believe it too much. And it's probably just pandering, because I think these same people, especially someone like Murphy, probably wouldn't have been opposed to this if Hillary Clinton was in office. Probably wouldn't, you know. So I think a lot of it is flip-flopping on their end as well. But when they do something positive, of course, we want to talk about that. And so this amendment to the NDAA is going to be, if it were to pass, it would withdraw all funding, prohibiting the Pentagon from spending any money on the Yemen war. And this is the power of the purse. Jason Ditz over at antiwar.com, which I'm looking at here, he says, previous debates over Yemen in Congress saw administration officials conceding that the war was never authorized, but the Pentagon also falsely claimed that the U.S. wasn't directly involved in the conflict. So this goes back to the propaganda. CNN, the so-called, this woman who writes for, what is the organization she's with? I don't know, I'm scrolling through here. It was some kind of a peaceful organization. Journalist, feminist pursuit of happiness. I don't know how you can be a feminist and support war. She's not directly supporting war, but certainly she's helping provide Pentagon propaganda that's supporting this war. Taco Salad says, I saw someone commented on CNN with that graphic saying they did their job for 30 seconds. Oh, yeah, this one that's showing up from that Jason Ditz put in his article over at antiwar.com, Antiwar News, which is a great resource for really short introductory news reports. Usually they provide links to all kinds of other stuff as well. So, yeah, maybe they did do their job in pointing out that this thing is happening. But then when you couple that with the propaganda that it's only just started really or really ramped up under Trump, then people don't – the problem is people don't get the right solution. And in fact, this actually continues the problem because if the people who are watching this and who aren't doing enough research, which I think is a lot of people, unfortunately, they hear that, okay, it was kind of bad before because they turned a blind eye and didn't actively stop Saudi Arabia. But once Trump got in, they became buddy-buddy and all kinds of people are dying and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Then what's the natural solution then? A lot of people who see this type of thing, they're going to think, well, oh, I don't necessarily like that mainstream Democrat that's running for office. But you know what? It's way less bad to turn a blind eye than to actively support the killing of these people in this other country. And so then the solution is for those people to vote Democrat. And then it happens again, and then the propaganda goes the other way. And this just perpetuates the problem. The foundation is wrong, and so therefore the solutions become wrong, and nothing gets fixed. So it's good to see this amendment introduced. I don't know if it would go anywhere. I'm assuming it's not going to. Jason points out that this is the only realistic recourse Congress has to President Trump's refusal to abide by NDAA limitations. The power of the purse allows Congress to defund conflicts. And as Senator Murphy says, and he's right, it's vital in this case. I think it's vital in all cases that Congress, it's pretty insane that the same people who passed a $21 trillion given us this massive debts. What is it? I don't even know. The amount of spending is insane. I'm probably getting the number wrong. Will Johnson, great comment. When your starting point is flawed, so too is your conclusion. But the spending is worse than ever. The budget is bigger. The deficit is larger. The debt is bigger. The unfunded mandates, they just continue on and on. So I don't trust Congress. These spending nutcases, whether they're from the left or the right, the so-called resistance, they just gave Trump all the funding that he wanted in the NDAA and the omnibus, and they're going to give it more and more and more. And you find a few holdouts that try to oppose things, generate some noise, but I don't count on these people to protect us. That's why, for example, when we talk about war, I would often refer to Obamacare. So many people that I found that were anti-war during the Bush years, and then maybe some of them that remain that way during the Obama years. It's just nonsense to think about this out-of-control foreign policy, the same people, the same organization, the U.S. federal government, being responsible for my health or the health of my mother. Like, there's no way anyone in their right mind can call for those two same things at the same time. I don't trust these people on foreign policy. I don't trust them on domestic policy. I don't think we should trust them anytime. So this effort is positive. I would like to see a lot of attention to it, But we have to recognize that Congress can't be trusted. Here's an old article from back in 2006 over at Real Clear Politics from Eugene Kontorovich. This is a legal scholar, constitutional scholar. And he says, the president could evade spending limits imposed by Congress by finding alternative sources of financing. Charles I paid for his wars by selling royal properties and borrowing money, thus bypassing Parliament. The English Civil War ensued. Surely the framers would not have left the Constitution open to this defect. Well, for example, he could sell U.S. military hardware to other nations to fund things. He is, after all, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. I don't want to read that whole paragraph verbatim for you guys. I'll make sure the link is in the show notes afterwards, posted on YouTube and, of course, at blog.10thamendmentcenter.com. But certainly, we're talking about how weapons are being sold to Saudi Arabia. If Congress cuts the power of the purse, couldn't the administration, this one or the next one, go to Saudi Arabia and say, hey, Congress isn't going to fund us through the normal channels. Well, we've been selling you these weapons. Why don't we upgrade the price and we'll raise some money that way? I mean, it's theoretically possible. This scholar thinks that it could be used, but it certainly is something that we can't trust. But if Congress were to cut this off and the executive had to resort to those type of kind of behind-the-door sneaky moves to continue raising the funding, or like they did with the Iran-Contra affair, then I think that creates more outrage and more pressure for it to stop. It's a very difficult thing to deal with, unfortunately. And that leads me to the quote of the day that I wanted to share before we head out of here today. It's a quote from August 20th, today, in 1789, Elbridge Gerry. He says, "What, sir, is the use of the military? It is to prevent the establishment of a standing army, the bane of liberty." As Madison put it, he said, armies and debts and taxes, these are the known instruments for putting the many under the domination of the few. So we have to recognize that this is very dangerous as long as this funding continues, as long as this foreign policy continues. Liberty is at threat. It's not just that it's harming people overseas or something that we can ignore. They use this as an excuse to oppress us at home, both economically because it costs so much, but then they also have to implement so many other policies, surveillance, etc., to stop people from opposing it. Justin, great quote. Yeah, that's a great one. I happened to just be digging through as I was setting up some posts for social media on Twitter and Facebook today, and I came across that one. And of course, the date and the timing is incredible. I think that we should. I think we should focus more on their wisdom and understand how it's a sword and it cuts both ways. So you can't ignore what's happening overseas and expect there to be liberty here at home. So some great comments here from Taco Salad, Justin, Will, etc. I want to thank you guys for tuning in and engaging in this conversation with me today. I've been learning a lot more and more as I'm monitoring what's going on in current events doing this show. So I hope you guys are learning things as well, finding some things that are interesting. If you've got some ideas, I know Will asked about Convention of States. It's not something that I generally cover, but if there's a lot of people who are interested in me sharing some views on that, that's maybe something that I'll talk about in the future. So if you've got some other ideas on things to talk about, things that you'd like to see me cover, please leave a comment either here in the live comments. You can also post them when we share the video on Facebook or Twitter or on our website, blog.10thamendmentcenter.com. You can email us at team@10thamendmentcenter.com with your ideas. Of course, smash the likes, help us spread the word by sharing this video with other people. We will see you again on Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much for tuning in with me and watching another episode of Good Morning Liberty. I hope you have a great Monday. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.